Hey, my name is Foxy, and today I'll be talking about the subject of feminism. Basically refuting feminism, saying what I think about it. Feel free to leave any opinions you have in the comments, but for now, listen to what I have to say. Try not to be biased or anything. Let me first start off by saying, what is the definition of feminism? So, by definition, a feminist is someone who describes himself as believing in equality. However, only 7% of British people describe themselves as feminists, and fewer than a fifth in America. And this is because people have come to realise that feminism is no longer about equality anymore. It's quite convenient to kind of treat men like shit, and then turn around and say, well, feminism is about equality. But it's not that anymore. It's a nasty, vindictive, misandrist, spiteful, man-hating philosophy that I reject completely. I actually don't mind the idea of a feminist movement when it has to do with equal rights, which was the second wave of feminism. The first wave was the suffragette movement back in around 1900s to around 1912, who wanted the vote. Fun fact actually, women actually didn't want the vote back then, and it was mostly men who wanted them to have the vote. But that's not the point here. The third wave feminists have come, and I don't even fucking know what they're on about, or what they fight for. I mean, we've already got equal rights, and equal votes. But here I am. They march on Women's March, while also pressuring men's marches to be shut down. It's quite funny to kind of believe in equality when you do stuff like that. So, first of all, they criticise gamers, which is a minority by the way, ironically, and say that women video characters normalise sexist attitudes and rape, without providing any kind of data to back that up. Then they talk about models having unrealistic standards of beauty, when I don't hear them talking about how male models the same way, who resent males as having six packs, being handsome, a full head of hair, etc, and should be willing to risk their lives for your comfortable office job while you don't have to do anything. And then there's like the portrayal of father in shoes. So there's always like this dumb dad who generally has a level-headed, intelligent woman to fix stuff. So for example, Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin, Hank Hill, even Jerry Smith or like Timmy's dad from Fairly Odd Parents. I don't think that's meant to be intentionally towards men, but what I do think is it's been kind of normalised to have that kind of standard. I don't see very many feminists complaining about stuff like that. The feminist movement is creating an unequal society. You're more likely to be blamed as domestic abuser, even though research shows the opposite actually. And some fucking idiots have made men attend consent seminars showing that they think just because you're a man you're going to be a rapist, and so men are so afraid of being accused of rape falsely that they avoid going anywhere alone because they want a witness to testify on their behalf. A man can have his life ruined just with the mere accusation of rape or sexual harassment, while a woman faces no consequences for, by the way. In my opinion, you should be put in jail for life for false accusations like that, because it doesn't just mean that you could have ruined a man's life or you have ruined a man's life, you could have made it harder for real rape victims to come forward, and I thought you were for women's rights. The idea of a rape culture, which seems to be in loads of people's heads, when they say that perhaps 1/4 or 1/5 of women will be sexually assaulted in campus. To have a rape culture, it suggests a system in society that encourages rape. I don't believe that any more than you do. We don't encourage rapists, we just simply put them in jail. Personally, I think the rapists should either be castrated or killed, but that's just my opinion. While feminists seem to think that it's okay to have just 3 months or however long it is. Then I'll talk about the idea of the wage gap, which has been debunked several times, but I'll explain it. So Obama says back in about 2012 to 2016, this all started back there, when he was on his second term, that for every dollar a man makes, a woman will make 78 cents. So this is actually true. If you take a broad brush of all men and all women, you can come to that conclusion. But what they don't take into into account is the different life choices that men and women make. For example, women might decide to stay at home more, take more breaks, or work jobs where you're paid less, simply. If people were really paid 78 cents for every dollar someone else gets, that has been illegal for decades and is not right. So, there's also the idea of Islam. I see a lot of feminists kind of criticizing Christianity, which you're definitely fair to do. I do it all the time. And they criticize Islam. But they don't criticize Islam, even though Islam is the oppressors of women. They oppress women and they kill gay people. And I don't see very many feminists talking about that. Did you know that in Rotherham in the UK, 1,500 young girls were raped? And the police were too scared of being called Islamophobic to intervene until eventually they got caught. And this is making the world an unsafe place. Here's a few privileges that women get over men. And men, well, they have it kind of worse in this ways. So, men have to pay more car insurance. A woman can demand a man to pay child support after she rapes him. You spread theories about domestic violence being a tool of the patriarchy, ignoring the fact that lesbian couples are the most violent and gay couples are the least violent, which suggests quite a high discrepancy between women being violent and men being violent. Now, this can be due to a few reasons, but personally I think that's just because of the fact that they think they can get away with it just because they're women. And that's been put forward by the feminists, that if you hit a woman or whatever, it's bad, even if they attack you first, which I personally find ridiculous. Did you know that nearly half of all domestic abuse victims are men? And over 2/3 of domestic violence is perpetrated by women. Men are more likely to die while working, and men's life expectancy is shorter. And men are presumed to be aggressors in domestic violence cases almost all the time. For some reason, men can't take jobs that involve working with children without being presumed a pedophile. There's actually a preference for girls to be adopted instead of boys. Men who show their emotions are told to be weak and to, quote, man up. Men make almost all of the suicides. Boys are most likely to be falsely diagnosed with ADHD, meaning they take medication when they don't need it. Men pay more income tax out of the proportion to the earnings gap. Men make up most of the homicide victims. Gay men are more likely to be victims of hate crimes than lesbian women or bisexuals. A father has no say whether he wants his child to be aborted or not, and the mother doesn't even have to tell him that she wants an abortion. Violence against men is treated like a joke when it's done by a woman, but the opposite is definitely not true. There are no domestic violence shelters for men. Men who try to talk about men's issues are called misogynists, told to check their privilege. And if that's the case, feminists, why don't you check your privilege? On an end note, I don't hate anyone that's a feminist or whatever. If you truly believe in the idea of equality, it doesn't mean you're stupid if you believe in feminism, this kind of movement here. It just shows you're a bit misinformed. Please stop being what one would call a feminist, because if you were really a feminist, you wouldn't be fighting for feminism as a quote. You'd be fighting for everyone's rights. You wouldn't be shutting down people for having different opinions than you. You wouldn't be perpetuating these lies about what men are like, and you should be taking into account that men have issues too that need to be talked about. It's illegal to mutilate genitals in females, but it's perfectly okay to get circumcision with males when they're young, which goes against the consent, by the way, but I don't see very many feminists talking about that. Nobody assumes that a woman did something to deserve a kind of domestic violence abuse, or just abuse in general. The same isn't very true for men. Fun fact, men die from prostate cancer at 73% of the rate of women who die from breast cancer, but breast cancer got 2.3 times as much public funding in 2014. Privilege is not being forced to sign an agreement saying that to get a driver's license you have to fight and die for your country. Men are more likely to have their kids taken for them in a family court. It's socially unacceptable to kind of fat shame women, but it's perfectly alright for them to have like standards saying, we want men to be fit, we want men to have a six pack, we want men to be tall, we want men to have a nice beard or glasses or whatever thing you want. Men get more years in prison than women for the same crimes. Men are more likely to suffer from mental disorders or Down syndrome. So that's the end of my video. If you have any opinions, then just tell me and I'll listen to them. If you can disagree with me all you want, but whatever, it doesn't matter. You're allowed your opinion, I'm allowed mine, so let's keep it that way.